One industry whose fortunes have changed with a unified tax regime or GST in India is warehousing. Suddenly, this sector is hot. In 2016, it barely received the attention of any large global investor. Come 2017, the biggest players of the world, DHL, Everstone, Singbridge Ascendas, have announced plans of investing over $2 billion into creating mega warehousing spaces in India. And as we ended 2017, the government handed over another bonanza, giving logistics and infrastructure status. Today in Urban Reality, we look ahead at what 2018 holds for warehousing, which geographies, which players, which industries will make the most of this new opportunity growth. Joining me on the show today, Anshuman Magazine Chairman, India and Southeast Asia, CBRE India. There's also Binaifa Jehani, Director CRISIL Research, joining us. They've come out with an extensive report on what are the geographies which are likely to benefit from the warehousing boom. Gaurav Karnik, National Leader, EY India, is with me here. Of course, also a direct tax partner at EY. And we'll also be joined by Sanjay Dutt, CEO, India Operations and Private Funds, Ascendas Singbridge. Ascendas Singbridge has formed a joint venture with First Space Realty to enter India's logistics industrial market and, of course, has committed huge amounts of money to that business. Okay, so let's start with GST, which was already a music to the ears of players eyeing the warehousing pie, and then came infra status. So, Binaifa, what kind of growth are we really looking at for this particular business, which is just warehousing and industrial parks?
Yeah, Monica. So clearly we are seeing huge amounts of investments in this sector, and why we are saying so is that clearly if you were to look at most private equity players today, earlier they were investing in commercial office spaces, but now the kind of REITable assets that are really there most of them have already been bought over. So clearly the shift has now been into warehousing. So that's the next segment that they're looking at. Again, from the point of return, so we in-house also did a quick math. We did a detailed assessment trying to understand what would the project economics look like and what kind of yields we are really looking at. And clearly it showed that, a 9 to 11% kind of a yield we are looking on when it comes to warehousing, which is pretty much similar to, say, a commercial office space, which was around 8 to 10 kind of numbers. So clearly on that front, it's because of that we are seeing huge investments. We are expecting as high as around 150 to 200 billion over the next 3 to 4 years.
150 to 200 billion dollars over the next 3 to 4 years? Is that the figure? Have I heard you correct?
That's rupees.
Oh, okay.
That's rupees.
I was just wondering. I said, oh my God, this is a math that I've never read. All right, so that's rupees. Okay. Anshuman Magazine, come in here. So, real estate, the biggest play of 2018, warehousing, the biggest real estate play of 2018?
Frankly, I wouldn't say it's the biggest real estate play because office market will remain big. Residential is quite big. But certainly this has been going on for a few years but is gathering momentum. GST is really the trigger now for consolidation for larger format warehousing. But certainly 2018 will see a lot of activity in the warehousing sector. What is interesting is that the interest from foreign players. So besides from Singapore, there's Canada, there's American firms. Warburg Pincus has done a joint venture with Embassy Group. CPPIB has done a joint venture with Indospace. We have not seen that in the past. And every year now, 10 million square feet plus of warehousing gets constructed, absorbed, in fact, more than constructed. And this was not the case a few years back. So 2018 certainly warehousing and logistics will be the flavor of the season,
All right, Gaurav, so when I said biggest, I didn't mean biggest in terms of size. Of course, warehousing is a very tiny part of the overall real estate pie. Office, commercial, retail, everything outnumbers it, and residential outnumbers all of these. But I meant in terms of the investor interest and the growth story that we will see. Sum it up for us. I mean, the numbers that Binaifa's talked about, 150 to 200 billion rupees is also not a small number at all. These are not the numbers that we were looking at even as late as 2016 or even in 2017. We haven't summed up these numbers.
Yeah, the thing is that the numbers are very large and they need large investors to kind of meet that capital requirement. The warehouses that we are looking at are, really large play, big boxes, not the small, the old types which were there. For that, you need long-term capital because the warehousing is a long-term play. The positive part about warehousing is it's got a rental yield to it, and as large pension funds or long-term investors, what they're really looking at is a rental yielding asset. Commercial space, like somebody's already said, a lot of the assets already taken, and so there's more of build to core going on rather than picking up ready-made assets. So warehousing gives you that play that you have a slight development play to build the warehouses, and then you have the rental yield. So, and if you come in early, obviously the yields will be much higher and better. And so we definitely see that as a big area for investors this year.
So here's how I'm looking at it, Anshuman, and correct me if I'm wrong. The office A-grade assets are all taken up, and Gaurav has hinted towards it, and it's been well-known fact as well, and there's a big fight, whether it's Brookfield and Blackstone and everyone gunning for that tiny pie of grade A office assets. So warehousing seems to have now opened up. Are the yields looking better in warehousing than they are in office space? Binay first said 8 to 10% versus 9 to 11%. And in a readable product, even a 1% difference is substantial. I mean, is that true, or are you just hedging and saying that's the range we'll get?
Partially true, not fully, because the challenge warehousing faces is the rentals are quite low. They are firming up. They're improving as the quality of warehousing improves. As the companies who demand warehousing, they also expand. So, the FMCGs, the engineering and manufacturing, the e-commerce companies who are the key occupiers of these warehousing will start slowly paying higher rentals, because the challenge in the past was, besides the GST for consolidation, the quality of warehousing wasn't good because the occupiers were not willing to pay higher rentals. So that will start improving. And as far as the yields are concerned, they're still relatively low, but they will eventually improve, especially when the large institutional players are there. The occupiers are getting better quality, their sales are improving. So it also depends how the FMCG, the e-commerce companies perform, and are they willing to pay a higher rental. So it will, I would say, as an investment, office would be still, and the scale, office would be still more attractive. But like you rightly said, the choices in the office space are now getting limited, and certainly the focus or there will be more play in the warehousing side.
Binay, come in here, give us your assessment of readable assets within the warehousing space. How many years will they take to come up? Because, the big daddies have just got into it. The 4 to 5 lakh square feet spaces have just started coming up. I mean, there have been a few, but as we consolidate the market, then you might see big boxes as what Anshuman referred to going forward. But how much time will it take for it to come up? I mean, what is the typical time frame for a large format, mega format warehouse to come up?
Yeah, so somewhere here, if you look at the industry today, it's a highly unorganized, fragmented industry. So from that point of view, we believe it will take at least another 4 or 5 years till the industry really gets into that mode where it gets much more organized. Today, although you're seeing that kind of investments happening, but frankly speaking, at an overall industry level, those numbers would not be still so big as compared to what the industry today is. So clearly today, if you were to look at the overall industry, even something like a normal go down, people look at it as a warehouse. So somewhere because of GST, we believe there'll be a lot of consolidation. The ask from various players, from various customers would be more towards the organized, having mechanization, having more of technology, those kind of things. So somewhere we believe there's going to be a paradigm shift in the kind of warehouses that players would really ask for. And that is where we believe it would take some time. So at least another, say, 4 to 5 years till things really pick up in a big way.
That is what I wanted to hear. So this is just the start of the story, probably. Gaurav, 4 to 5 years. So are we a little early in our excitement on warehousing, or do you think that looking at all those big names which have come in, probably the lines might get crunched and timelines might get shorter?
No, I think it's not so early for the excitement, because I think this year you'll see actually more investors and more players come in. The thing is that warehousing, like when I first said, it'll take some time to build the big boxes. And but at the same time, there could also be pickup of some existing assets. I think one issue which I see is also with so many players coming in, there could also be a higher supply. And therefore, on the rent escalation, we're not sure, how much will be the rent escalation in the few years going forward. So that's one thing which could lower the yields. The second part is on the land price, getting the large piece of land that you need. at the right price. I think that's another constraint which is there.
Okay. Anshuman, why are groups like Embassy venturing into it? I mean, these were hardcore real estate players who don't have any warehousing experience. I mean, if you look at everybody else, whether you look at Indospace, they come with some background. You look at Singbridge Ascendas and their tie-up with First Realty, that also has a background in building logistics and warehousing spaces. Why? I mean, what is the excitement amongst large real estate developers of India to get into this?
Number one is diversification. The residential market has been slow, and the other products coming in, diversifies your income source. Second is also that that if you look at today, developers sitting with commercial properties, they have tasted the so-called blood of income-producing assets, right? And that's what warehousing can also provide. And I think the most important part is in India, acquiring land is very difficult, and developers know how to acquire land. So it's not easy for a foreign player to come and say, look, I have the domain expertise, I have the technology, I've done this in 10 other countries, but the challenge they face is acquiring land. And the developers, and that's what their expertise is, so they can acquire land and then tie up with Embassy has done, some of the other people have done, and get all the expertise. And then of course getting approvals to get, because obviously the rentals are lower, land values are still high. The only other good part is, someone was discussing, the timing of this. Construction of a warehouse takes much shorter time than an office or residential, especially with the new construction technologies, etc. So the supply will come sooner than later. So it will not be like 3 to 5 years for the supply to come in. The supply will come in next 2 years' time, and then we have to see how the market plays out and how the demand is. So it's really tied to the manufacturing, our Make in India, how that rolls out, how FMCG companies do, how e-commerce companies do, and that's where we get a clear picture in next 2 to 3 years' time.
All right, next 2 to 3 years. Sanjay Dutt, so conversations have centered around, how much time will it take for new grade A logistics, warehousing spaces to come up in this country, and what kind of yields are we looking at, considering that land prices continue to remain very high? What has been your own company's experience since the announcement of that, fund for warehousing?
We are very encouraged, Manisha, because we originally, like Anshuman did mention, that we expected a lot of challenges on the land, we expected a lot of challenges on the approval. It's not easy to scale so quickly because of land valuations, because it's very sensitive business to land valuations. Fortunately for us, we've been very fortunate to have land, acquired it quickly, and now the approval process is almost 6 plus 6, means 6 months for approval, 6 months for execution. And once you start phase 1 of any large warehousing park, the subsequent supply is actually easier because you have already built the necessary infrastructure. So we're looking at building 2 to 3 million square feet, very quickly. And some of the sites that we're looking at are actually brownfield. So it will give us a kind of a quick turnaround for those projects. So we're quite encouraged, actually. And it's not just the new demand, Manisha, something I wanted to mention, is the current demand which needs to be relocated to better warehousing parks.
Okay.
And that's where we see a tremendous opportunity, even in the office side, Manisha. Even today, 40 to 50% of office leasing is relocation consolidation. It's not just new. It is existing multiple leases coming together. And the main purpose behind this is the corporate want to be more operationally efficient, because it's better to have the entire infrastructure in one place, manage it well, you have a team which looks after, so it's very easy. So we expect a lot of existing demand, a lot of new demand, the kind of sectors that Anshuman also mentioned very rightfully. They're likely to grow and therefore fuel growth for this sector.
Okay, very interesting point. I mean, your experience
and not to mention now the single branded retail is also open, Manisha.
Absolutely.
You know.
I mean, I was
so
thinking.
So the FDI in single.
I was
Very
going to
encouraging.
mention that because that's going to add to the excitement and that demand for warehousing. It's one of the sectors which is going to drive the demand for good quality warehousing space.
Correct.
But interesting to know that, you know, even brownfield warehousing spaces which are not matching the international quality can be turned around. We'll talk about that, and we'll also come back and talk about geographies, because, you know, every company post GST is looking at how do they move their supply chain. Let's get that answer when we come back.